Damn, look at the size of those potatoes. That's insane. Imagine getting hit with a potato. Guys, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the poop flinging contest.
Have begun to surround the EU headquarters in Brussels. As the protest eventually became a fiery riot, the Belgian police began to deploy their water cannons.
It's kind of hilarious.
To which the farmers responded with blasts of manure, somewhat similar to Dragon Ball Z, just crappier. And although this seems silly, the situation is quite serious considering the farmers are the only thing that stands between the citizens and starvation. So what exactly is making these agriculture workers from all across Europe revolt against the European Union? As yesterday, farmers traveled across the country to Belgium, arriving late into the evening outside the European Union building, eventually setting fire to the trees outside. Early morning, local law enforcement began preparing for the protesters. Now, several farmers explained what they were angry over, but not knowing French, apparently they're protesting competition with foreign farmers that don't have the same regulations as they do. And I'm all for the free market.
Sound familiar?
But it's hardly free when local farmers have carbon emission standards and taxes, increasing minimum wages, and general quality expectations. And now the EU says local food is getting too expensive, so let's import cheaper goods from places that don't have those regulations we implemented. So maybe that's why angry farmers are dropping off potatoes to be tossed at the European Parliament building.
Oh shit. Your boy dropped a loot bag. And potatoes. At least they're not throwing rocks or breaking the sidewalk.
As they were tear gassed, the farmers used tennis rackets to pass them back. Now this went on for quite some time, at almost a stalemate, until their tractors were used to tear down their barricades.
Call it what it is. It says sounds like people ruling over farmers and they know nothing about farming. It's exactly what it sounds like, actually. That's a really good point. And if it sounds familiar, it should. And I actually have personal experience with this in the state of Rhode Island and being in construction, and some of the rules and regulations they try to set on the business and the industry that you're like, you're going to make me do what? For what reason? It's going to cost the project to take longer while at the same time making the price go up.
Posting up a sign that roughly translates to, "Here begins the dictatorship" in French, as blue-collar protesters have no issue hauling away heavy planters.
Damn.
Then coming in with a automatic firework cannon.
Yo, these dudes are crazy.
Starting a large tire fire in the courtyard, then dropping off hay bales to make it worse.
Damn. And does this remind you of anything? Think about the French Revolution, right? Think about the American Revolution against the British, right? It all comes down to the people being pressed so hard until they decide to be like, you know what? I'm tired of this bullshit. We need better leaders, right? And they either cause social distress, or in some revolutions, they just take out the ruling class.
As eventually, the riot police began to push back the farmers. The tractors did stage somewhat of a counterattack, pushing back the police.
They backed up quick. They had no choice.
Rocks or abnormally large potatoes at the cops.
Damn, look at the size of those potatoes. That's insane. Imagine getting hit with a potato. You go home and you got a clean potato out your ear. Oh, this is crazy.
But eventually, the water cannons prevailed.
Yeah, of course they did. Nobody wants to sit there and get wet all day.
Forcing out the farmers from the courtyard. And even whacking the stragglers with their crime-fighting sticks.
Go back to Get out that boy. It was like, damn,
where the farmers finally fled the scene. And into the evening, local citizens began
look at that.
collecting the left
Hey, free mashed potatoes for everybody. It's like a loot box.
behind potatoes, which is just a subtle reminder that these aren't far left Antifa protesters, these are
Right.
the farmers that feed us. So what exactly has them so angry, and whose side should you
Right.
be on?
Also, if they wanted to cause more of a chaos, they probably could have. They just chose not to. They wanted just to show that they were against the proposed plan and were simply disgusted with what was going on. But I think if they wanted to cause a lot more havoc, they probably could have.
The mainstream media basically has zero credibility. Well, let's just look at the AP's article on the South American Free Trade Deal, reporting the farmers believe the agreement will undercut their livelihoods, but there are political concerns that it's driving
course it will.
support for the far right, as the deal will make trade between the EU and several South American countries free from duties on almost all goods. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I'm an expert in import duties, but what I do understand is this is pretty much the exact opposite of what President Trump is doing for America, as Trump's
Right.
tariffs get constantly slammed by the liberal media, writing, "The affordability crisis is real and Trump's tariffs caused it," which is exactly what the Democrats want them to say, complaining about the record high prices, despite the fact that this is mainly, if not entirely, their fault. Completely
Right.
ignoring the $200 billion tariff revenue it is.
I think it's important. Let's look. I want to go back to this graph right here that he went through kind of quick. If you look at it, Trump prices, Biden prices, and then now Trump's in again. We'll see if he brings them down. But the price increase really was under Biden. Also, if this situation reminds you of anything, just think about globalization as a whole, especially here in America. You know, a lot of companies went out of business because jobs were moved overseas. Well, you got to ask yourself, why were things moved overseas? Well, if I can make, I don't know, let's say a mouse, right? A computer mouse for, it costs me $5 to make it in the US, but I can make it in China for $1 and shipping is $2. I now have turned a $2 profit by moving all the jobs into a different country. And so I think this is what the farmers are complaining against from what it seems like, because the policy is gonna allow for folks from countries that don't have the same regulations to be able to import their goods, immediately undercut the goods.
Their fault, completely ignoring the $200 billion tariff revenue it has generated. And the cash is a nice bonus, but it's not the intended effect of the tariffs. It's the bolstering of both jobs and national security by bringing manufacturing back to America, which the corporate media already has their lies ready and waiting, despite the huge investments into American manufacturing across several industries totaling hundreds of billions of dollars. So although I'm not exactly certain of the specifics of selling out your local farms for cheaper foreign food, I completely distrust the mainstream media's pluses as to why it's good for us. As the AP's article again frames this as worrisome
Far right.
far-right
Oh, God.
rallies, saying this free trade deal will counteract China and the US's blitzkrieg.
Let's just say for a second, this is a far right rally, right? Let's just say that that's 100% right. Now compare it to other rallies, specifically when it comes to the left. You notice they're breaking sidewalks, they're throwing bricks, you know, they're breaking businesses, they're messing things up. At this rally, there was some things that were messed up, but most of the things that were messed up could be washed away. Yeah, they started a fire with tires and hay bales, but that can also be thrown in the trash. And they threw potatoes and they threw poop, which sucks and it's shitty, no pun intended, but it can be washed away.
Putin's appetite for conflict and for chaos is already there, and it will only grow. And Russia is already menacing our skies, our waters, our streets, and our national security.
Preparing their citizens to sacrifice themselves for war.
It's absolutely clear that Russia's hard power is something to fear. Sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a part to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. And more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means.
It's bad enough they've proven they just see their citizens as tax cattle to fund all their ineffective progressive nonsense. But now,
Right.
they're saying they see your sons as sacrificial lambs to a war that a majority of them forgot about. Which brings up the bigger concern of all those foreign newcomers that already fled this war once before when Ukraine
Right.
was initially invaded and have been receiving social benefits in the EU ever since. So if these European leaders think they can just send their citizens to be the first to fight their newest war to defend the men that refuse to fight it, I think their protests are going to become a lot worse than Manure.
Yeah, it makes a good point. And my camera went out. 1 second. There we go. We're back. So yeah, so I mean, he makes a good point. I like Decoy.